Well, welcome everyone to the first CIO to CIO series. I'm Alan Tate, Executive Chair of the MIT Sloan CIO Symposium. And today we'll have a panel discussion that will be moderated by Shamim Mohammad, Executive Vice President and Chief Information and Technology Officer at CarMax. CarMax is a $30 billion industry leader, a Fortune 200 company. And Shamim also serves as the independent director of the board of a Fortune 150 publicly traded company. He is highly sought after and a widely recognized speaker and thought leader on topics such as leadership, innovation, culture, and digital transformation. In 2020, the MIT Sloan CIO Symposium selected him as the recipient of the highly respected CIO Leadership Award, which recognizes CIOs that lead their organizations to deliver exemplary levels of business value through the innovative use of technology. And in 2021, Shamim was recognized by Forbes as one of the 50 most innovative technology executives in the US. And with that introduction, we welcome you, Shamim.
Thank you, Alan.
Before we get started, just a quick bit of housekeeping. This session will be about an hour. During the first half, Shamim will lead a discussion with his panel, which I'll introduce momentarily. And during the second half, he will lead a discussion with all of the audience members. This is a somewhat informal format. So if you want to ask a question, go down to the bottom of your screen. You'll see reactions in Zoom. Click that and click the raise hand button. And I'll call on you, and then you can ask your question. And with that, Shamim, I hand it off to you, sir.
Thank you, Alan. It's good to be with my friends here this afternoon or this morning, wherever you may be joining from. We have a really exciting topic and a very exciting panel to have a very lively, engaging discussions for the next hour or so. First, let me introduce my two co-panelists. Maryfran Johnson is the host of CIO.com's CIO Leadership Live video show and podcast, which since 2018 has featured in-depth interviews with more than 100 enterprise CIOs, CTOs, and chief digital officers. The show broadcasts live to LinkedIn and CIO's YouTube channel twice a month and reaches thousands of IT leaders. I really benefited from that live show for many, many times. Very exciting one. If you haven't listened to it, I would highly encourage you to listen and follow Maryfran on that. So Maryfran is the former editor-in-chief of both Computer World and the CIO magazine. Maryfran spent more than a decade producing and moderating 10 CIO executive events a year. That's a lot. Most notably, the prestigious annual CIO 100 Awards Innovation Conference and CIO Hall of Fame Honors Program. Widely known and respected across our industry for her deep knowledge of IT leadership issues and her extensive network of IT leaders, Maryfran founded Maryfran Johnson Media in October 2019. To continue her work connecting with CIOs and digital leaders with opportunities to build their leadership brands and be recognized as strategic business technology innovators. And I have known Maryfran over 20 years. I'm very proud to call her a friend. So welcome, Maryfran.
Thank you so much, Shamim.
You're welcome. Next, we have George Corbin, someone also I've known for a while. And first time George and I met briefly was when he was leading really the exciting area of digital business for Marriott. George has been leading innovation and business transformation of large disrupted companies for 2.5 decades. He has served as a public company board of directors at Edgewell Personal Care, chief operating officer for Silicon Valley tech startup Onriva, and chief digital officer at Mars Incorporated, and the chief digital officer at Marriott International, where George built a $40 billion digital business. Very, very impressive, George. George has successfully led some of the world's most iconic brands through some of their most challenging transitions. George is also a venture partner at Next Gen Ventures. So welcome, George.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, it's exciting to have two friends, long-term colleagues joining me today on a key issue or key topic, which is the evolving role of the CIO. And CIO roles have been in flux and evolving for many, many, many years. And over the last 3 years, those roles actually have gone to a whole different level, but that's not the end of it. Over the next year or next couple of years, I believe the CIO role is going to be up for test even more, and there's a lot more demanded or expected from CIO and digital leaders. So with that, let me ask Maryfran the first question, because you had the front row seat over the last 22 decades
Yes.
in seeing all these leaders evolve and how the role has been transforming. So if you can share with us, what do you think is going to be most needed from now into the future for a CIO or tech leader?
Thank you, Shamim. I love that question because in all my time at both Computer World and CIO Magazine, we were always trying to answer that question every year, like how is the role changing? How is it shifting? Where does it go to next? And it's been especially gratifying over the last 3 to 4 years to see CIOs and chief digital officers and chief technology officers, because the titles and responsibilities have blurred more and more over time. But it's been wonderful to see them finally achieve that strategic business relevance and importance that they actually were seeking all along. I can remember stories from the early 90s when we would write in CIO Magazine about the evolving role of the CIO. And I think the reason it's been evolving so consistently over time, Shamim, is that the technology changes so much and the CIO role has grown and changed with it. And its importance to business has become more and more obvious, I would say, to the rest of the C-suite. I know in all those years that I was doing various events for CIO Magazine and for our CIO events division, I used to build all of the events I did around 3 major proponents that I've always seen as the bedrock of the CIO role. And they are innovation, leadership, and business strategy. And if there's anything that I'd say is changing most dramatically and fluidly over the next year or two, it's the way that balance is being maintained and changed by the CIOs in those positions. Innovation has always been a big part of the role, but the nature of leadership in the CIO role has, I think, changed quite a bit, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that. But also the business strategy has become so cemented into the foundation of the way CEOs plan for the coming years, and just the importance of that merger between technology and business strategy. It's never been more important, and I don't think it's ever been more widely recognized than it is now.
Maryfran, I couldn't agree with you anymore, because CIOs as business leaders, and that's probably the first and most important attribute, and that's not going to change ever. Let me turn to you, George. As Maryfran said, right, one of the bedrock quality of a successful leader is going to be a CIO as a business leader first. So if CIOs are business leaders first and technology leaders second, in some cases, with both aspects being very, very critical, many CIOs are still today struggling with being a business leader. Now, you, my friend, is a great example of who can be a good business leader and a great technology leader. So can you share a little bit with us, like what made that transition successful for you, and why some of the other CIOs or tech leaders are struggling with this still?
Yeah, I'm picking up on Maryfran's themes, that innovation, leadership, and business strategy. I mean, a lot of it comes from that. I'm also reminded, I don't know if anybody here remembers, but there was a TV commercial back probably in 2000 when we had the .com boom going on, and it was at the time it was the head of IT sitting down with the CFO, and the CFO's like, what is this system thing? What is it? Why do we have to do this? And the guy kind of sat there like a deer in the headlights for a moment, and he said, for every $1 you give me now, I'll give you $2 back in 6 months. And then it's like, oh, done, right? And I've thought of that often over the years, because so often it's about, you've got to anchor everything into this highly resonating kind of business value, so that every non-tech executive is going to clearly understand this, like that CFO, kind of make it a priority. So first of all, you know, for me, it was, the company needs growth, better growth, it needs better margin. So how do we first off start there? How do we anchor off of that, right? So with growth, can we get incremental revenue? Can we prove it? Can we get new customer acquisition? And then on margin, it's like efficiency. Where are we going to bring costs down? Now, unfortunately for folks in the tech area, that's often the first focus over certainly the prior several years and continuing now, which is, where are you going to save me costs? So what we would actually do is we would start every senior funding or internal alignment pitch with executives, what have you, with what we called the 3-finger death punch. The 3-finger death punch was essentially coming in with saying, here's 3 facts you need to know to kind of light a fire. You're losing share among the largest customer segment. We're losing share to new intermediaries who cost us 10x per transaction, and our loyalty's dropping. We kind of set the tone and show we're anchored on the business needs here. And then we show, now here is where the tech or the digital proposal is going to solve it, by when, and what the payoff is going to be. So that was one. I think another important one, and I think most of us probably feel we do this, but it's how you articulate it, demonstrating our ability to actually commercialize technology. Still sometimes suffer from being put in a box. Oh, the tech people, as opposed to, we are commercializing this and delivering value. And then similarly, Maryfran, picking up on your theme about innovation, how demonstrating we are going to market quickly with innovation. Tech, strangely, isn't always thought of as the innovation space. It's often like, oh, marketing is going to come up with the innovation, or products are going to come up with the innovation. So that's an important one. And by the way, another thing I found helpful for folks was CIOs, CDOs, CTOs, where they struggle with this. There's always change and resistance. The theme that we adopted was ride the existing rails wherever you can, right? You want to get faster adoption, you want to overcome cultural resistance, don't make it too alien. Be able to say why this new thing is actually like this old thing, right? I remember when this new technology, it's just like when we rolled out that unified loyalty program 10 years ago. Remember that? Yeah, that was a screaming success, right? Oh yeah. Here's how we're doing it just like that. Oh, that's good. Let me help, right? So, and then I have one other thing that strikes me as I sort of think about this. Probably, so of all those things, and you know, much of that probably sounds familiar to folks, probably the most undervalued and underutilized method for CIOs and CTOs and all is actually compelling storytelling. You know what, we often get caught up in just the facts, ma'am, right? Here it is. Oh, we want this, we want to do this project or this initiative or this investment. And we go very left brain, right? And here's all the facts why that's a good idea. And so you engage everybody's left brain and think, yes, and here's all the reasons I could think we shouldn't do it. But storytelling, the ability to come up with a compelling narrative about the peril, about the stakes, it's like classic hero's journey storytelling, right? About the hope, which is our solution, and hey, we got this, and about the path to self-transformation, which is here's the roadmap, here's the funding, here's the people. I will tell you, I used to cart around a 160-page deck about this brilliant strategy. The breakthrough came when we instead went in with a 4-minute video following a customer and what that experience was going to feel like when we were done. And man, doors flew open. So people just leaned in, wanted to do that. And that is, remember, people really do make decisions on emotion and then justify with the facts and the data. So I would say anybody here in a role where you're really trying to drive this forward, really look at how you do your storytelling.
Yeah, I love the fact that speak the language of business and tell great stories. So I know a great storyteller who's among us is Maryfran. Can you add or comment on some of the things that George mentioned?
Well, I can't. I was the minute George started talking about storytelling, I was reminded of one of my CIO friends. Who's the now retired, although like most CIOs who retire, he's actually out there working at 3 new different jobs. But Justin Kershaw at Cargill, some years ago, where he was one of our CIO Hall of Fame honorees, and he was on stage telling a story about what he did with all of his IT leaders. He took groups of them each spring, and then I think he maybe did 2 classes a year, and they would go into Minneapolis and take an improv class where they learned to just be more comfortable with not just standing up and reciting the facts and showing some PowerPoint slides, but with telling a story. And then Justin had a rule, and I'll bet a lot of CIOs do this, where he would start anytime you spoke at a meeting, the first thing you did when you got up was to tell a story. And it had to be a customer story. It had to be something about the impact of the technology on the customers themselves. And it reminds me of another storytelling push that I think a lot of CIOs have just really embraced, especially during these last couple of years of the pandemic and post-pandemic. They've had to broaden their abilities to communicate and to connect with people. And the way you connect with people is often through stories. One CIO that I've interviewed a couple of times, Ken Grady from IDEX Corporation, he said he learned the most about storytelling by going out with his salespeople and watching what a great job they did at storytelling. And so he turned around and brought that into his IT organization as well. And the thing about CIOs is that they are constantly learning and changing and adapting. They're adapting to new technologies, but also to new management techniques. And I think that the leadership and training aspects around learning to tell better stories, I'd like to see more courses on that offered than certifications in various technology products.
Yeah, Maryfran, this connecting with people and sharing ideas and being able to tell a great story, they all kind of start on the foundation of having a good trusted relationship and partnership. People are willing to give you the time when they trust you or you have a good relationship. Maybe either George or Maryfran, one of you can talk a little bit about what CIOs can do to form a better relationship with their C-suite colleagues, or even in many cases, and we'll get into this a little bit, even working with external parties, or the whole ecosystem that we rely on to deliver the capabilities and business advantages for our companies, or the board of directors. So maybe elaborate a little bit on your experience or your ideas on how to build a great relationship with C-suite and the board of directors and anybody else who may be critical in the ecosystem that we operate.
Well, Shamim, before George and I tackle that question, I want you to tell us about at CarMax how you've done that, because you've been at the company, I think 8 or 9 years now, and you have a seat on a public board yourself, and it strikes me that you're kind of a phenomenal communicator when it comes to dealing with the staff and your C-suite colleagues. So let's start. You're the only working CIO amongst us on this call. You tell us how you do that at a $30 billion company like CarMax.
Well, times sure.
We're flipping the script on you, Shamim.
That's right. That's right.
That's what any great editor like Maryfran would do. I know.
Right.
Actually, time flies. I've been here over 10 years now. Soon to be 11. I know it goes by quickly when you're having a lot of fun. I think it starts with having a good understanding and a good transparent communication. So when I came to CarMax, 10 some years ago, I go back to one of the comments George made, and I didn't go start pitching new big ideas and big transformation or big projects. I really went there to get to know my colleagues and partners, understand what their pain points are, and spend a lot of time on a business strategy, what we're trying to do, what are the biggest challenges we're facing as a company. And that really enabled me to really focus on 1 or 2 or 3 things that are most important for the company and most on top of mind for my peers and colleagues. Mm-hmm. And that gave me an opportunity to really come up with some areas that we need to focus on. And the 2 partners I had particularly were the chief operating officer who's been with the company for a very long time. And he actually retired since, but he started with the company when we had 4 locations, and we're probably not even $1 billion company. So having him as one of the partners was really important because he had the trust and credibility of the organization. And then we had a new CMO who joined just about the same time when I became the CIO. So he brought in a lot of outside perspective. So partnering with him and basically COO and CMO and I, it gave us instant credibility within the rest of the leadership team and rest of the company. And we stayed together for anything major we did because it touched one of our organization. Mm-hmm. And so anything we did big came across as a company initiative, not a technology initiative, not a marketing initiative, not an operation initiative. So there we continue to build on that success. So if I look back 7 years ago, I mean, where we were and where we are today is a night and day difference. Our business model totally transformed. We have a really very much of an agile workforce. And in our market right now, we are very well positioned to continue to disrupt our industry. So it really went back. And if I go back and look at this time period, I think it started out with building solid relationship, having mutual trust, and really focusing on things that are more common challenges we had to overcome for the business, not necessarily technology. Because in many cases, I had to make a decision on slowing down or deferring a technology agenda to further the cause of the business. And my partners appreciated that because ultimately we got all of those done, but we went in a little different sequence. So that's probably where I would say just having that regular conversation, communication, understanding each other. One very much a tactical thing I do to maintain a good relationship, which is even today with my 3 or 4 of our senior executives, the C-suite, my colleagues, and we have a very small group of people anyway in that group. We meet literally every day, even for 5-10 minutes. We get together, we look through our calendar, everybody pulls out their phone, everybody looks at their calendar, see all the big things they have on there going on that day. And we use that opportunity to connect. And that makes a huge difference because nobody is ever surprised. It's a big company, but we operate like a small company because of the relationship. So that's a couple of things I do and I've learned in my career, but I'm very much looking forward to hearing from you, George and Maryfran, what advice or suggestion you have for others to manage a good relationship with the ecosystem we work with.
Yeah, that was good. It's good stuff. I'll build on that a bit with mine. I'd say, first of all, so you're trying to build relationships with like your internal leaders, your executives, other departments. And first of all, it's about trust, and trust gets won or lost on every interaction that you have, right? So what are some of the things that I find continue to add to the credits as opposed to the debit column? First of all, it's like promise and deliver, right? So whatever you're going to do, that you actually do it. Next, you got to kind of be non-parochial about your priorities. I mean, I got things I'm passionate about. We should absolutely be doing this. And Shamim, as you said, sometimes you got to kind of pull back a little bit and realize, okay, let me start it not being about me. How can I help others? So you got to get non-parochial about that. And that, what I found is how you really reach out to, so for me in digital, how I reached out to sales, how I reached out to marketing, how I reached out to others, and really help them out of a jam. Somebody after the fact kind of characterized the formula as give 4, take 1. Give 4 means give help 4 times before you make an ask, but then you'll get that ask usually granted. So, so much about the role, about the head of technology and digital is you're leading through influence, and you've really got to shift to persuasion mode. You got to shift to human psychology mode. It's not just the facts. You can't be autocratic. You can't be command and control. And so for that, really what you're after is common purpose. So for example, when I needed to get something funded, I reached out to marketing, and one part of marketing had this big problem they were trying to solve for third party relationships. I said, here's how we could do that. And in exchange, it was a bit of horse trading. It's like, get this thing funded. There'll be a way that we can make that happen. And sure enough, they could then hit all their goals at the end of the day. And we hit ours as well. Another really powerful aspect is, you've got to find that common purpose, and then you've got to set an MBO or a big hairy goal, around that and share it. So I had the same shared goal as the head of global operations, as the CMO, for instance. And so that meant finally we were sort of really working together, picking up the same banner and running with that. So I probably found those to be the most powerful. One other thing that I recommend, because I sort of just thought of this, because it is, again, it's often undervalued, is for CIOs, aspiring CIOs, CIOs who want to be on the board or elsewhere, get visible and inspire.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, again, if there are company town halls, if there are all hands, if there's board meetings, I have seen sometimes the most frequent mistake is, I'm going to get up and present the facts. I watched one get up and basically present their org chart as though our strategy is this org chart. It's like, no, inspire. Get up there and talk about, this is where we're going. I'm going to give you a vivid vision of our destination. Because what you're doing is you're recruiting. You're trying to find new champions across an organization. Because ultimately, that's what's going to drive your success, not how good just you are, but how much everybody feels powered up to be a part of this. And so really get visible and get up there and inspire about where we're going and how we're going to get there, and you can be a part of this, have made a real difference when I've seen those who have truly been able to go out and deliver big numbers.
Well, and I'll add to that. And I love the point that George is making, that it's about communicating the vision and telling stories, because over the last 4 years, I've been talking with 2 to 3 CIOs every month on the CIO Leadership Live podcast. And at the very end of those interviews, I've always asked them, what have the challenges of the last few years taught you about your own leadership style? And I went back and looked at almost 24 of those. They're all available publicly, so you can go in and you can actually scroll right to the last 2 or 3 minutes and hear what they have to say. And I went back and looked at a whole bunch of them and listened to them. And the communication, the storytelling aspect, the fact that innovation is messy, and so you have to keep talking about it with everybody, that came across so clearly. I had one CIO who said, let's all just be better humans. Let's communicate with each other. Let's check in. When you ask people, how are you doing? A lot of them now will say, how are you doing really? Because the empathy and the connection with other humans that came up during these last couple of challenging years, that has actually, I think, been almost a form of rocket fuel that is propelling all of these relationships forward. And one of the things I always look at, we have for the last 15 plus years, CIO.com, and before that, CIO Magazine, we've been doing a big research survey study every year called The State of the CIO. And I went back and looked at, and I remember it back into the, probably late 90s when we had been doing this. And when you go back and look at where the role has come, that's actually a lot of quantifiable data about how the role has changed over time. And the headline for this year's research findings was CIOs cement their leadership role. And then it went on to talk about the higher visibility in the organization, and other related elements like that. But the 2 things that have always interested me in that research, we there's about more than 800 IT leaders get surveyed by that every year, and more than 250 line of business leaders. So we're able to cut out some data that shows what the CEOs and the business unit leaders are thinking. And I've always thought it was fascinating looking at what the top priorities for CEOs are versus what the top priorities for the chief information or technology officers. And there were years when the top 3 CEO most important items didn't show up on the radar screen of some of the CIOs, but that has changed so much over time. And when I looked at 2023, the top CEO priorities, the number 1 was strengthening IT business collaboration. And for CIOs, the number 1 was driving business innovation. And so that feels to me like such a melding of the mission in terms of what everybody is focused on.
Thank you for that insight, Maryfran. And the IT and business. I mean, there's the concept there itself I don't like, because at the end of the day, IT is business and business is IT. At the end of the day, they are all together. And that's, if you look at our company over the last many years, that has been a biggest change. And I'm just really glad the state of the CIO and the research you've done and you've been part of really validates that that's the direction to go, because ultimately, it needs to be common goal, common objective. And I think, George, you're touching on, shared goal, shared objective. I mean, I think the unifying vision is so critical, and it doesn't have to be very complex. It needs to be simple that people can be inspired to work on and rally behind and put the trust so the company can move forward. So I'm loving these conversations. I'm going to actually change the topic a little bit, and then Alan will come to some of the audience question perhaps. One is, I think George and Maryfran, you also touched on this, is the CIOs cement the role. So they obviously have done a great job over the last few years and continue to gain importance and visibility across their organizations. But we're seeing more and more the CIOs are actually finding themselves in various large publicly traded company boards. And I'm an example, so is my friend here, George. So maybe I'll ask George this question, then I'll come to you, Maryfran. How does a CIO prepare himself or herself to take on a public board role?
It's when I was first, so Edgewell Personal Care, they're makers of shaving brands like Wilkinson Sword and Billy. They're in Banana Boat. They've got about 30 different consumer products. Consumer products companies have been undergoing a lot of disruption from insurgents, from technology in general. And so when they first reached out to me, it was because they were going through that disruption. And I basically told them, I said, look, my calling card for the last 2 decades has been companies that are being disrupted by technology, whether they realize it or not. And so fortunately, these guys had realized it. But I would say that what they were looking for, and in other companies I regularly speak to and advise, what they're looking for is battle scars. You have, and I'm sure each of us here, we have been in the trenches and we have seen this battle. So, when I was able to talk to them, I would say, all right, I've led a company through what you're just about to go through. And I said, tell me, and this is talking to banks, this is talking to CPG, this is talking to retail. And I would say, tell me if any of this sounds familiar. And I kind of run down this list of things and they would go, yeah, that's happening. Yeah, that's about to. Yeah, that's definitely getting us right now. And so really what they need is someone who has been sort of a journey leader on that. And they want to be able to learn from you about what works and where are the landmines. Similarly, then being able to come in, because you don't want to get yourself pigeonholed. We can talk a little bit about what pigeonholing can look like, but demonstrating that you've created business value, right? So otherwise they're like, okay, so we have a tech or an IT person on the board. Okay, great, covered, check that box. It's like, no, we all have an instrumental role to play in business value creation and driving growth, right? I mentioned, how do you actually commercialize tech? How do you actually go to market with innovation? How do you deliver that? So if you're able to sort of demonstrate that, one, you've led these successful journeys through disruption, and that you're able to then deliver top line growth as well. Those are that's got to be a very powerful part of your narrative. Now, for many in the tech function, then you also have to kind of expand your expertise base into other board that are the non-tech part, right? And there's training for that. I went through National Association of Corporate Directors to get sort of training and certification, but you get, because you want to understand what the SEC regulations that apply to you, what your fiduciary responsibilities are, what does it mean to be on an audit committee, what does it mean to be on a compensation committee, et cetera. And the other thing I would say is, again, getting to the point of your visibility, because it's like you can be great at all these things, but you got to get visible. Post or publish your point of view on things. Yep. Have a voice. Be useful, be helpful. Don't be self-promotional, but get out there and talk about the challenges, because that's how you'll resonate with people.
Well, and I'll add into that. I had the same question when in 2020, for a year or two there, I wrote a series of columns for CIO.com, and it was all about CIOs and the board. And I started out because I used to have so many conversations, especially with my CIO Hall of Fame, the new honorees. We'd sit around at the gala dinner, and some of them would be within a few years of maybe thinking about retirement or what their next mission or their next chapter was going to be. And I would ask them, well, what are you planning to do? And every single one of them was planning to be on a board of directors. So my next question, and I mean a public board of directors where you're paid for your knowledge, and this was, most of them are already serving on nonprofits and volunteering their time. This was like a new wrinkle or a new chapter in their careers. And then I would ask, well, what are you doing about it? And nobody had an answer to that. And so the biggest mistake that I think CIOs make now, especially the ones who have amassed all kinds of successes with digital transformation, with dealing with cybersecurity challenges, basically with helping their companies on the business strategy front, they think that the board is just going to come looking for them. And the idea that you have to be very intentional, it's so different from just looking for another executive role. CIOs, especially the really well-known ones at Fortune 200 companies, they have recruiters calling them all the time. And most of the people I talked with in that kind of group thought that, well, a board recruiter will call me. But it's au contraire. You actually have to put a shingle out. You have to start making it known. It's a visible hunt. It's an interest. And this is something that's very unfamiliar to CIOs, which is why George's suggestion to get involved with NACD. There's women's leadership groups that are doing special board readiness. And one of the columns I wrote was all about whether CIOs should sit around waiting for retirement to start their board search or do it now. And it was unanimously, the conclusion was, you're more valuable now that you're in the midst of it. You're in the midst of an operational role, and the growth that CIOs experience when they are on external boards. One CEO was very encouraging to his chief information officer to get out there and be on a board. And he said, this is ideal because you're going to get an entirely different kind of executive education, and I don't have to pay for it. So they get out there and, they learn such a different point of view where you're learning more about it's oversight instead of operational. And that brings a whole different dimension to your career. And that's something and Shamim knows this, George knows this. Every time I get on the phone to interview somebody, I go and I look at their LinkedIn profile, because for better or worse, that is our professional network in technology. And 98% of the time, I'm kind of disappointed in the way CIOs are presenting themselves on LinkedIn. Everybody could be doing a better job at that. And you don't just go in once every couple of years. You kind of constantly, it's sort of like your living resume out there. And that's where you want to start connecting with other CIOs that are board members. And there's, I could give you a list of 10 things you should be doing if you want to go look for a board seat. And most of them involve your network.
Maryfran, I'm gonna quickly just add, because you sparked a couple of other things. So one with regard to LinkedIn, I think the pivot that too many folks still haven't made is, don't think of LinkedIn as a resume page. You think of LinkedIn as your personal brand, your personal product. What is the product that is you? What is the value prop that you bring? That's what it should say.
Yes.
Right. A list of jobs is just to sort of back up your assertion to say, here's my secret sauce. Here's how I can help, because boards are looking for people who can help with their business challenges. So you want to make that clear. Here's a dirty, and now about recruiting, here's a dirty little secret. One, sometimes your best path in is going to be through recruiters. But the dirty little secret is this: recruiters don't make money on board placements.
Nope. They don't.
So what you need to do is, if you have recruiter relationships, continue to cultivate them, be helpful at matchmaking for them other placement opportunities they have where they do make money, and then have, if you're interested in a board, have a board ready CV that you can shoot to them and just say, hey, by the way, if you have clients, because usually what they'll do is they might throw in a board placement as sort of an add-on to a true recruitment. So you want to be known and available. And that's the type of thing, like, you don't wait until you need that role to then apply for it. It's like, this is a long sell. This is a relationship sell, right? So I would advise that as well.
Yeah,
Well,
some really great advice from George and Maryfran on basically the next role of CIO, right? If that's an ideal role for a CIO to be evolving into a board of director for a large company, or even any public company or private company that has some size and scale. I think that's a great way to continue to evolve our career and our profession. I think the two things I was just trying to add to the comments from both George and Maryfran. One is, I agree with Maryfran 100% that we should be looking for a board role while we're working. Because I'm finding this to be very true, right? I've been on this board of a $30 billion company over the last year and a half, and I've learned so much just being involved with a whole different industry and whole different set of management team. And the board role is very different than a management role because, as Maryfran mentioned, it's a governance versus management. So that takes some practice, and being while working as a management person in another company is giving me really that opportunity to continue to fine-tune my experience on both sides. So that's been a pretty gratifying. The other thing I would say is, the best way to prepare, which I found very beneficial, was continue to develop a great relationship with the board of the company that you're working for. So over the 8 some years that I've been in the CIO role and 10 years with CarMax, we have some incredible board members with a lot of experience. Just being able to work with them as a business leader, not necessarily a technology person, gave me tremendous learnings and insights. So when I wanted to be a board member, I could emulate or learn from some of the best board members I had the opportunity to work with. So those are just a couple of additional comments I want to make here. Alan, let's look at the audience and see if there are any questions that we'd like to get into there.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a great conversation. And at this point, this is a somewhat informal conversation compared to our panels at the symposium. So I invite everyone to go down to reactions, click on that at the bottom of your screen and click raise hand, and we'll call on you. So I'm confident that a lot of you have questions and you're just being shy. Okay, Irving, you're up.
I knew Irving was not going to be shy. Hello, Irving.
Yes, well, this is such a great opportunity to ask the question I want to ask. Here we have 2 top CIOs, and Maryfran, you are so involved with top CIOs and have been for a while. So here's my question. I've been very closely following what's going on with generative AI, large language models, chatbot, GPT, and so on. And there are 2 areas where there is huge activity. On the one hand, the research community, at MIT, at Stanford, University of Pennsylvania, lots of papers that are getting written on what people are finding about this, and lots of interesting things. The second area is the press, the New York Times, the Economist, and on and on and on. And this is not surprising. It's such an interesting story. On the one hand, do these things know what they are doing? Are they just a stochastic parrot? Or do they have human-like intelligence? And at the other end, are they an existential threat to humanity, whatever that means? So how about the business world? And of course, in the business world, I would start with the CIO, CDO. So what are you finding in the business world that you deal with these themes? Where are people, George, Shamim, Maryfran, looking at this now?
So I can start, maybe then I'll let George and Maryfran kind of chime in. So I am looking at this with a lot of curiosity and optimism in terms of how do we leverage this new set of rapidly evolving capabilities to really, for two aspects of my business. One is continue to deliver a great experience for our customers and our associates. And also, how do we use this set of technologies and new capabilities to make my business much more efficient? As a CIO and CTO of a very large company, we all are getting pressure in terms of optimizing our business operation, making it more efficient. While we're also getting a lot of push to continue to innovate, and that's nothing new. But I think the demand is getting even higher for us to deliver on those two dimensions. So we have been using OpenAI, that before ChatGPT became very popular in some use cases with generative content and user reviews for a lot of the cars we sell. These are actual content by actual users, but we found the OpenAI platform to really to modify and organize this content in a way that makes it easier for our customers to shop cars. So it took like probably 10, 15 years worth of content writers' work, and we could get that work done in a matter of hours. So that has been a pretty significant benefit for us. We found a good use case. And again, you can Google it, Microsoft, OpenAI, and CarMax, you get to learn a little bit more about it. So that's just one use case. And we're using, not maybe generative AI, but we're using AI and machine learning in a lot of different parts of our business today. And I think that's just scratching the surface. I think there's a lot of opportunity to really leverage this new platforms, because a lot of innovation coming in this space. The key thing I have to keep an eye on is really being responsible with it. Make sure we're not doing something that we don't want to do and as something that's counter to our core value as an organization. So we are putting a governance model in place to keep an eye on how we are using generative AI and all the new capabilities in our organization that supports our mission, doesn't detract us and make us, counter to our core value. So I'm going to pause right there. George, Maryfran, feel free to jump in.
Yeah,
Actually,
sure. I'll be happy to just add a bit to that. So when you look at all the sort of media bubbling that's going on around, yes, all the froth, thank you. It harkens back to, it's like, let's see now, so what happened to metaverse? So what happened to NFTs? What happened to, right? Everything goes through the hype cycle, what have you. Now, with that said, I believe that generative AI is probably the most disruptive force I've seen since mobile. This one's got legs. This one's got something that I can immediately see there's actionability off of it, because what I ultimately look at is what would be the use cases, right? So I went off and I started tinkering around in Midjourney, right? Which is basically, it's like ChatGPT, but to create sort of visuals, right? So photos, video, what have you. And it was each time just my jaw dropped about what was possible there. And I can see many more things there. So when you look at use cases on the business side, I mean, those types of tools. So right now, immediately, you're seeing a lot of activity going on around marketing and sales and customers.
Yep.
So whether it's marketing collateral, whether it's customer care channels, whether it's chatbot, whether it's any of those things. But then you're seeing other applications where folks are really speeding up on testing their code. So let's get the code in. Let's see, does this actually work? And people say, man, we're really compressing timelines on that. There's opportunities here around forecasting. So strategic planning, instead of it's like, okay, let's take 100 pages of PowerPoint slides that we've accumulated from 15 different data sources, and instead pose the question, frame up the prompt. And see, okay, what's that feedback? And then actually applying this stuff to your own data and third-party data, coming up with more accurate forecasting, prediction modeling, threat detection, things of that sort. Now, as always, there's a downside to any of this stuff, right? So Samsung just got themselves into trouble because they ended up loading all this proprietary code base into ChatGPT. It's like, okay, maybe you don't want to do that. So Shamim sort of talked about governance and controls, and so on a board role, I look at this and think about, yes, let's absolutely be clear about the opportunities, but let's also be clear about what are we doing about what are the implications for data protection? What are the implications for possible trademark infringement? What are the sort of control measures and stuff that we need to put in place? So this is one of those where I was a little sketchy on metaverse, a little sketchy on NFT from a business standpoint, but this one, it's got legs. And I think this one's with us, and it is evolving so quickly. Hell, I went on vacation for 10 days. I came back and I realized that all my skills on Midjourney are now out of date because it came out with version 5. Right? So I got to go relearn how to use the keyboard, I guess.
Well, and of course, from a media perspective, I was always, whenever I talked to CIOs, for many years, I was trying to get somebody to come on stage and talk about blockchain, because we kept hearing about how the general, the online ledger was going to be the thing. And even financial services companies who were playing with it in their labs didn't have anything to say about it. There was just no obvious immediate use. That is not the story with AI. I mean, the machine learning, as Shamim and George both know, has been going on. It's been helping to make production issues more efficient and so forth. And the AI, this is simply a very fascinating pathway that's attached to AI. And AI has been something, data and machine learning and all that. It has been a very keen focus and interest of CIOs for many years now, and they are indeed finding uses for it. I look at some of the numbers from our State of the CIO research, and they asked about how companies are investing in technology and who is spending on what. And CIOs were anticipating their involvement increasing and their budgets corresponding to that. 70% of them were anticipating more cybersecurity focus. In fact, I've seen that cited as the #1 reason that tech budgets are likely to increase this year and next year are concerns about cyber. And I think some of the AI product use and the chat GPT and the applications to cybersecurity are going to be, they started out hype a few years ago, but I think that they're going to be much more realistic. For the last couple of weeks, I've been doing this chat on my interviews with CIOs, where I go through a couple of leading edge technologies and I say, is this hype or is this happening? And hype is to NFTs, and metaverse are still falling into hype, but I didn't even put ChatGPT on the list because it was so obvious that it was happening. And AI and machine learning, more than half of the 837 CIOs in this last round of the state research there, more than half of them were going to be playing a heavier role in that. Their companies are getting more interested. And if the CIOs are interested, that means their C-suite is interested as well. And that George mentioned the magic word customer. There's that was in fact improving customer experience was #3 on the CEO top priority list. And it has been in the top 5 for CIOs, the customer experience thing, for the last 5 years or more. So the fact that customers are going to be using this, and there's going to be ways to drive greater customer experience using some of these tools carefully, and there will be mistakes made. But one of the CIOs I spoke to recently said we should remind everybody that innovation is actually messy. There's going to be things that happen that everybody ends up apologizing for and drawing back from, but you have to have those kind of things happening if you're going to move forward at all. And again, I'm always tracing things back to communication skills. If you're talking with your C-suite colleagues, if everybody is on board with trying something, reminding them that innovation is messy and that we're going to try A, B, and C, and they may all blow up on us, but then we're going to learn from that and move forward. That seems to be a pretty solid recipe for success these days with technology.
Yeah, the
That's
culture what you're touching
excellent.
on is the culture of experimentation, right? So that's really the core, because the other thing you're going to try may not work, but ultimately by trying more things, we'll find a few things that really will work. Alan, I think looking at the time, we probably have time for one more question, maybe a brief one.
Yeah, I think one more question if someone wants to raise their hand.
And, you know, while we're waiting for that, Shamim, I wanted to pop in at one point. You asked about how CIOs can be building, or maybe George brought it up, the brand that you have out there on LinkedIn or in the rest of the world. And I definitely have some suggestions there. For one thing, do take a look at your LinkedIn profile. It is your leadership brand. Your personal and professional leadership brand is already online. So what does it look like? No matter who's going to be looking at it, every CIO I know wants their company to be a magnet for technology talent. And where is tech talent going to go and check you out as a boss and see how often you're posting, see what people are saying about the things that you're posting about your staff and what they're doing, the projects you're working on. They're going to look at your feed on LinkedIn. So tap into that and participate more visibly. Shamim, you could probably give a whole list of great pointers because you're on there. You're pretty busy running IT and technology and innovation for a $30 billion company. And I see you on LinkedIn a couple of times a week, and you're usually promoting something that your staff is doing. So get out there and do that. Also, raise your hand for panel opportunities when you hear from Alan at MIT, when you hear from my friends at CIO.com and they want you to be in a virtual summit. Do that, you know, show that you should. The only thing that you can't call yourself a thought leader if you're not out there sharing your thoughts with the rest of the leadership community. So get out there and do that. And also apply for team awards. Get it, throw your hat into the ring for MIT's CIO Leadership Award, for the CIO 100 Innovation Award every year. That's actually an award that is intended for your teams. So get out there and, you know, be visible and talk about them, brag up on what you're doing about technology. I think that's a great way to attract more and more talent to your companies.
All right, we have one last question from Jay.
Hi all, this has been a great session, and this might be too complicated of a question for the last 3 minutes, but it seems like the last 3 years we've all been scrambling and innovating and experimenting and doing anything to hold the business together and kind of survive what we've been living through. Now I feel like I'm at a moment of rationalization where I need to pick the winners and get rid of some of the losers. And of all those ideas we've been trying, I was just wondering if you had any good stories or good insights into that process and how you know, come back to a world of normalcy, if that's where we're going, and you know, evolve.
Yeah, go ahead, my friend.
I was going to say the first thing I think of, and I've heard about it from so many CIOs, make sure, like, renew your commitment to your listening skills. You know, talking more with your staff, making sure that they understand what the mission is going to be going forward, and are they communicating with you enough? So I would say pay attention to listening skills. I hear a lot about leading with empathy. And a big thing about empathy is that you talk to people, as one CIO put it, you know, you act like we're all human beings. So you tune in and you listen more. So back over to you, Shamim.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, you know, over the last 3 years, you know, customers have changed a lot, and our associates also changed, right? People, how they work, how things get done also change. So this is a good time to take an inventory of what's working well, what's not working well, and really looking at your overall business strategy and see where you should be focusing on. You may have to turn off or slow down some things that are probably not as critical right now, and then really focus on 2 aspects, which we're doing in our company. One is, again, experience. Ultimately focusing on our customer experience, focusing on our associate experience. So anything we're doing as a company, focusing on that is getting a priority. And then also we're looking at operational efficiency. We internally, we call it E square, efficiency and experience. So if the work we're doing and are tying into those 2 buckets, then we shouldn't be working on it right now. So that's how we're looking at this.
Great point.
All right, so Shamim, George, and Maryfran, I want to thank you for joining us. This was an excellent panel. And for the rest of the audience, I invite you to join us on April 25th at 1 p.m. for the second of the CIO to CIO series. Vigesh Gadave, who's the Global Vice President and Chief Information Officer at McDermott, will lead a panel discussion, The Digital Enterprise Hyperreality. That's it for today. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great
Thank
job.
you, everybody. See you later.